Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. Today in this video, we will be looking into Spring Boot aspect-oriented programming interview questions. Most of the interview questions in AOP is related to the practical implementation of how you have implemented AOP and in which scenario have you implemented AOP in your enterprise level application. So in the start of this preparation series, we will see a live demo on how to implement AOP in existing Spring Boot web application. What are scenarios where we can implement it? What is advice? What is point cut? What is join point? Types of advices? What are cross-cutting concerns? How to implement cross-cutting concerns? Proxies? Many more such interview questions. Please like, share, subscribe and comment so that this video reaches to more of the people who are preparing for interviews like you. So let's get started. And first create a Spring Boot application with the three layers, the web layer or the controller, the service layer and the data layer, that is repository, and implement AOP in these layers. And what will happen if we do not implement AOP? What will be the repercussion of it? And also what are the disadvantages of AOP also? We will be seeing that with the Spring Boot application. So let's go to Spring Initializer and create a Spring Boot application now. So I'll be taking Java as a language, Maven as a build tool. 2.7.11 is the Spring Boot version. My group name or the organization name in the reverse order of DNS can be codedecode, com.codedecode. Artifact name can be AOP demo. Name of the project can be AOP demo. So this is demo application for Spring Boot AOP. Package name becomes com codedecode AOP demo. I want it as a jar with a Java 11. Now I'll be adding dependencies for this. So web dependency for sure is needed. Then also we would be needing a JPA data dependency. Then also we'll be connecting with MySQL DB. So SQL Yog I'll be using as a front end or the UI to view our databases, but at the backend we need a MySQL connector. So MySQL driver is what we are adding to the pom.xml, and let's quickly generate the application. I'll be importing this application in my IntelliJ. Imported the AOP demo project in my local and the sync is complete. This is my AOP demo application where I'm going to implement AOP in a web application. In the pom.xml, if you can see, I have Spring Starter Data JPA dependency, Spring Web dependency and MySQL connector dependency, which will be used for our entities to get saved and retrieved from the database. So to make it as a web application, we need architecture, that is the MVC architecture. We'll be needing an entity package, a controller package, a repository package and a service package. So let's quickly create these packages. This is my entity package. I'll create another package as controller, another as repo, and the last one as service layer. Also for time being, I'm going to create another package named as AOP. When this application is ready and up and running, we'll be implementing AOP. So in the controller layer, I'll be creating a new class as employee controller. We will be needing an entity called as employee. Now this employee has to be an entity. This employee will have two fields, @ID and @generated value for ID. So private int ID and name. Now I want getters and setters for this, so I'll quickly generate them. You can also use Lombok, that will be much easier for you to not to have it generated. I'm just having a quick demo, so I'm not using Lombok as of now, but you can always do that. Since your entity is ready, let's quickly create an interface named as employee repo. This employee repo has to be @repository, and to make it as a JPA repository, you have to extend JPA repository having employee as the entity. And let's import employee and JPA repository also. Now we have repository in place. We will be auto wiring this in service layer. So let's create a service class, employee service. This is going to be our @service annotation to make it as a bean, and I'm going to auto wire employee repository. Now this employee service will be auto wired in employee controller. So first of all, employee controller has to be @REST controller, and it should have the request mapping, and also it has auto wire of employee service. Now once this is in place, now I need my functionality to be implemented to make it as a web application. I would be needing to fetch all the employees and save an employee. So just 2 operations out of 4 CRUD operations, I'm just implementing 2, that is find all and add an employee. So let's quickly add 2 methods, controller methods, one for get all and one for post mapping to add an employee. Now I will be needing to create these methods in service layer. So in service layer, I'll be needing to add this to repository and fetch from the repository. So let's write the code for that. So this is the find all to return all the list of employees. This is save to save an employee in the database. So we have all the structure ready and up and running for us. Let's quickly try running this application and see whether we are able to add the data to the database. This is SQL yoke for you, where in this table currently all the tables are empty. Once this is ready, I'll be having my entity created in the database. Since I'm generating value for ID, I will not need to send an ID in the request body for the employee controller. Hence, ID will be automatically generated. Name is only thing I'll be giving. So let's start the application and see if our table is getting created. Okay, the only thing is we didn't set our data source URL. So what we have done is we have the data JP repository starter in our application, but we have not configured any link to our codedecode database. So let's quickly add the properties in the properties file to have this up and running. So these are my properties: the JDBC URL, username, password, dialect, DDL auto, show SQL, and hibernate format SQL. With this and these, we'll be able to see all my SQL being hit in the console. Also, I have shown all these things when we were doing the Spring CRUD demo. So I'm not going to repeat it now. Let's quickly see if the application is now running for us. Great. So if you can see, the table is created. A Hibernate sequence is also created. This is for employee entities ID, which is automatically generating, and the application has been started. If that has been the case, when I refresh this table, I should have my employee and Hibernate sequence table. So currently employee is empty and Hibernate sequence has a next value is 1. So whenever you add an employee in the employee table, the next value for ID will be 1 and the name that has to send from the postman. So currently if you try to get all employees with localhost 8080 code/all, that is the link to our controller. So this is /code/all. This is the /code/all, which is going to return you all the employees. So currently it is empty. That is also shown in the SQL yoke also, that if we don't have anything here. So now let's try to add an employee with a name as code. And I'm going to leave the ID as empty. I'll be expecting the ID to be generated by its own. So let's try hitting it and the result should be 1, code. So great, this is 1, code, and our SQL yoke should be also able to see this. Let's refresh it and 1, code is saved in the database. Now if you try to find all, you will be able to see at least one employee in the database. So great, your enterprise level web application is up and running as of now. But then there are multiple things which we do, that is logging. So whenever we hit a controller, we might also need to monitor how much time it takes to return a response to client. What we usually do is we print here system.out.println request to fetch all employees started, and usually we add the current timestamp. So the new date is going to tell you the exact date and time where your request to fetch all employees started. Now again I'll do the same system.out.println here, and then we'll wait for this to happen and then see how much time it takes. Similarly, when I go into the service method, when doing the find all, I'll print a statement above this, that system.out.println, we are in the service layer and this is going to get started. So there are multiple logs that you have to put in the code, and this makes code very clumsy. So rather than adding every logs at start and end of every method, let's do one thing. Let's not make this so clumsy where your code is just one liner and rest all is logging. Let's not do that. Let's segregate logging. That is a cross-cutting function that is used across all the layers of the web application. So you need logging in controller layer also, you need logging in service layer also, you need logging in repository. If you had a repository IMPL there also, then why not to segregate this logging feature completely from the business logic and let this business logic be clear and actually do its own task. If the logic is to fetch an employee, then just fetch an employee. Why to log it? Let the logging be done as a separate aspect. So that is why aspect-oriented programming came into picture, and hence AOP gives you a way to segregate your logging feature from your business logics or your controller logic and keep your code base neat and clean. So let's try and implement all such logging features in a separate AOP folder, and let's then after that come back and remove all these things and see how beautiful our code will again become. So in the AOP folder, I'll be creating an aspect, employee aspect. A class is always called aspect and hence to be annotated with aspect. All the methods inside the aspect becomes the advice. All the methods that you're going to write into this class will become the advices. So also we need to make it a bean. So @component is also required. Now we will be writing the advices. Now I say that in the employee controller, before starting any of the method, please log it that we are starting to do this particular method. So before, and here what comes is before executing what. So before executing, value equals to execution of a method. Then comes the two parameters. First, what is the return type of that method and what is that method. So I want to make it over the controller class, right? So the fully qualified class name of that has to go here, and then I want to make it over employee controllers every method. So this is employee controller dot every method means star. Star means every method in the class employee controller having any number of parameters. So for any number of parameters you put dot dot. So this becomes your point cut expression. What this point cut expression says? It says before executing any method of employee controller with any number of arguments, please do this. And what is to be done? So this is going to be a simple public void method called as advice. So before advice, this name can be anything, but for better readability, it's an advice before this. And I'm going to have a join point here. This join point will be the place where this point cut executes. So this join point is nothing but this method and this method. So join point is the business logic where your advice is implemented. And how do you tell where it has to be implemented? Using this point cut expression. So this point cut expression is going to cut through your business logic's method called as join point and implement that advice method before and after it. Remove it from here and put it in aspect. So request to, it can be fetch all employees or it can be add an employee. So fetch all employees and add employee will be the join point. So request to plus join point dot get signature. It will give you the name of the method or the join point where it is doing its work. And then you say it started at new date. So it will say that request to, now what is the join point name? Fetch all employees. So request to fetch all employees started at 23/26 on 16th of May. That's how this advice with this system.out.println logging will be implemented using this point cut expression on that particular join point, and everything here that is written is encapsulated as an aspect in aspect oriented programming. That's all. That's how simple the aspect oriented programming is. So let's try running this and see whether this actually works for us or not. Let's put a debugger here and let's see how it gets debugged. So it says application started perfectly fine on port number 8080, and now there is nothing in the logs right now, right? Now I'll try to hit fetch all employees. So fetch all employees will have a point cut expression of com code decode controller employee controller. So com code decode controller employee controller and all the methods. So when I try to fetch all employees, I can see my debugger has first get intercepted here. So that's the advice for you guys. This is how every request gets intercepted if the point cut expression evaluates to the join point you have here. So here my join point is execution of com code decode employee controller fetch all employees. So yes, you have hit the fetch all employee, and just before that you have created a point cut expression to evaluate to that, and hence this advice is created. But this advice is not created for employee service. So when you try to get all employees, this system.out.println will be printed, and again this advice will not be created because this is on controller class and not on service class. So let's see. Yes, get all employees called, but again aspect is not called. Again aspect is not called because it is not on service layer. It's rather on controller layer. So if you can see your request to your join point signature. Join point signature says fetch all employees started at 16th May at 11:32 p.m. So that's how before advice works. When your point cut expression evaluates to the method which you are trying to hit, if the point cut expression matches, then this before advice is applied just before it. So even if you try to add an employee, then also this will be fetched. So if I try to again add an employee with name as Decode, again this particular join point is called, and again you will have the same thing. Request to add employee started at 11:33 p.m. So this was started as 11:32 p.m. This was started at 11:33 p.m. So that is how the join point @before works. I can also print @after. So just before returning a response to you, this after advice will get executed. So request to this ended at your current timestamp. So again, what is the join point here? Join point will be the evaluation of point cut expression. What will be the point cut expression? All the methods with any return type of employee controller with any return type will be evaluated as a point cut expression for this after advice also. So when I run this again, first request goes to this advice, then to the method, and then again back to this AOP because it is after advice. So @after is needed here. Let's rerun the application. It started. Let's try to fetch an employee now again. So first a call goes to before advice and it's printed. The request fetch all employees started at 23:35 p.m. Then after advice gets called after you just before returning to the client or just after the point cut expressions evaluation to join point is evaluated successfully. This after advice will be implemented once your join point is executed completely. So this was your join point, fetch employees. So once this is done its task, then the control goes to @after point cut expression. So now you can see a request started at 23:35 while the request ended at 23:36. So can you see these two time difference? Because we were in debug mode. That is why it took this much of time. Otherwise it will be in quick milliseconds. So this is how you can put the logs. Request to fetch all employee started and request to fetch all employee ended. Now similarly, if I try to add, I'll have request to add an employee started and request to add an employee ended. So let's try adding codedecode 1. If you can see, before advice implemented, after advice implemented, and in between the Hibernate queries have been implemented. So request to add employee started, everything has been done in the code, and then response for add employee ended. So @after is executed after the execution of join point, @before implements just before the execution of join point, and in the between time the join point itself gets executed like this. So this clarifies your @before and @after advices in the aspect of aspect oriented programming. Now I also need to implement another type of advices to you. So before and after we understood, there are also some more type of advices, and also I need before and after to be executed for my service layer. So I'm going to copy these, and now I want that before advice for service layer to be executed and after advice for service layer to be executed. But now my point cut expression changes. Now I do not want this in employee controller. I want this in employee service. So here I'll go to employee service package. So this is employee service package and this is also employee service package, and the name for the class becomes employee service. So I'm going to change this in my aspect that now for any method with any argument with any return type in the employee service class, please execute just before it and just after it. So request to service layer fetch all employees started, request to service layers add all employees. So what is the method signature for get and add? That is get all employees and add employee. So this started and ended will also be printed here. I am going to remove this system.out.println from here, from all the places, because I want my code to just have the business logic or the controller logic and not the logging logic. So this is how beautifully you can code your business logics and controller logics and segregate all your logging and everything in a separate file called as aspect, who is going to have multiple advices for multiple layers, and this cross-cutting function will be working on multiple layers of your web application. Let's try running it and see if this works for us. So when I try to fetch an employee, what will happen? First, controller method will be called. So this request to fetch all employees will be started. Then what will be called? After will not be called. Why? Because after that service will be called. How does the flow goes? First an employee, fetch all employee from controller is called. After that employee service is called. So get all employees method will be called. So now the @ before of controller and @ before of employee service will be called. So this will be called first, then before advice for service will be called, and then when you are returning from the service, this method is called, and at the end when you are returning from the controller, this method is called. Execution will be before advice of controller, before advice of service, after advice of service. Why? Because once you get into the service, first employee service will be done with its task, and then control comes back from the controller. So let's see if this happens. Let's see with the get all employees. So a point cut for before advice of controller class is called. After that before advice of service is called. Then after advice of service is called, and then after advice of controller is called. That's the exact how we are expecting it. So if you can see in the response also, a request to fetch all employees started. Request to service layer get all employees started. Then your service layer task is done, and as soon as your service layer task is done, after of service layer is executed, and then the request of controller gets ended. So it all started at 11:42:07 and it ended at 11:42:15. So that's how you have your before and after implemented in a single file called as aspect. Also you can do one thing. I have implemented both in one aspect, employee aspect. What you can do is you can create employee controller aspect and have before and after there. Or you can also have employee as service aspect and have the before and after for service there. But it is okay to have both of them in the same file also, because it is clearly mentioned that this point cut expression will evaluate only for controller and this point cut expression will evaluate only for the service layer. Best practice can be anything. It depends upon how beautifully you want to segregate or modularize your code. If you wanted a good modularized code, then even divide this employee aspect in multiple classes, one for controller, one for service. This will give you a single responsibility model of design principle. Now we also have 3 more aspects remaining to be covered. We have covered @ before, after. We have @ after returning, after throwing, and @ around. We will be seeing this in the next video. So if you want me to cover all these advices, live demo, and all these examples of cross-cutting concerns and all the interview questions of these, just let me know in the comment section. I'll create the second part of this video. Thank you.